Hello, everybody, and welcome to Music Industry Insights Worldwide. Today, we've got the awesome Randy with us. Hi, Randy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, and what you do?
My name is Randy Ojeda. I'm a music attorney based in Tampa, Florida, in the United States.
Yeah.
I've been in the music industry for over a decade now.
Awesome.
Um, it kind of had a weird pathway to get me to practicing law. To give a little bit of the background, I started um, when I was in law school. I started managing a rapper,
Okay.
which is not the typical thing that you do when you're in law school, but
No.
it worked for me. I was managing this rapper, and then I started managing some other rappers, some producers, and just kind of kept building this management company.
Yeah.
So when I graduated law school, rather than doing what most people do, which is take the bar and become a lawyer, I stayed as an artist manager full time.
Right. So
Um,
that gave you the contacts in the industry as well, then.
Exactly. Yeah. I did that. At its peak I had about 10 or 12 bands,
Wow.
artists under my roster. Yeah, I was very busy. Um so I did that for many years, and then I also started doing distribution for or I'm sorry, I started doing A&R for a distribution company
Yes.
called Symphonic Distribution. So I
Oh,
did that while I was doing management.
yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed, learning about different aspects within the industry and different sides of things. And then it wasn't until the pandemic happened, which is when, I went from traveling all over the country and,
Completely down.
going to all these shows to, yeah, to just sitting at home. So I figured if I was ever going to retool and pivot,
Yeah.
that was the time to do it. So
Awesome.
I studied for the bar, took the bar exam, became a full attorney, and yeah, thank you. And then started this music law practice, and I haven't looked back.
So that's kind of a specialized area in law as well. So do you have to kind of
It
qualify
is.
and then do a specialized kind of topics to get that? Or how does that work in entertainment?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in music law, obviously. So while I was in law school, I did take um, every course that was offered at my law school in relation to music and entertainment and intellectual property.
Yeah.
But really, it's something you have to kind of learn while doing. Like there's not really a specific course or a guidebook on. I mean, well, there's the Donald Passman book, All You
Yeah,
Need to
I've
Know
got
About the
that.
Music Business.
Yeah, I've got that.
Definitely a good resource, but at the end of the day, it's something you really need to kind of figure out as you go.
And obviously, you've been an arts manager and you've been in the industry for a while. What kind of changes and challenges have you seen over that time?
Um, I've seen a lot of changes. So, when I first started, it was especially with hip hop, it was kind of called the blog era,
Yeah.
right? So, this was the time where you would when you would release a new song, you would just send it out to a variety of blogs, large ones like Pitchfork or Stereo Gum or what have you, to smaller blogs, and then they would post about your music, and that was really how you broke through to the mainstream. Like if you got posts from these major blogs, you were on it. You were
You're
doing
making it.
great.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But now it's not really that way anymore. Like yes, these blogs are still in existence and they still have some relevance, but really the way artists are growing and getting attention these days is through their own social media channels.
Yeah.
So that wasn't as large of a thing 10 years ago as it is now.
Yeah.
Now you really need to build the content on your own, and artists have become more than just artists, but actual content creators.
An entrepreneur
Um,
as well, I think. I think that's what
exactly.
it's like, isn't it? And I think that's what's made it really difficult. I think the barriers to entry have obviously got a lot lower as well. So there's more competition. What's your
Yes.
thoughts on feelings on artists making it now? Because the development side of things has kind of gone as well, hasn't it? Like there's no artist development anymore.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I think in terms of making it, first we got to kind of define what that means. Like what
Yeah.
does it mean to make it, but I think in general the artists that are finding success in this day and age are the ones that are cultivating their own communities and
Mhm.
their own niche.
Yes.
Because if you can, if you can mobilize a group of people, whether it's 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, whatever your audience size is,
Yeah.
those are going to be your supporters, and those are the people that are going to help you make it. As opposed to
Yeah.
back in the day where you wanted to widely cast a net and just get as many, passive followers as you could, because they'd buy a CD or whatever. But now it's like you really need that hyper focused, engaged audience to cultivate your fan base,
And then
you know?
back in the day, they used to sell CDs, but we don't really sell CDs anymore, and make much money from recorded music. So what's your
Right.
advice to artists that for doing that as well, and making money? Because that's really,
Yeah. So that's where things get difficult, right? So nowadays you really need to um, have alternate revenue streams. So the music is almost like your advertisement or your calling card to get
yes,
people to get people's attention. But
yes,
once you have their attention, you need to sell them something else, or you need to be monetizing your audience in some other way than just music. I mean, obviously, it's great to sell records, and people are still selling physical products, and vinyl and CDs are having a bit of a resurgence as well.
yeah,
So, you still want to sell those things, but merchandise is more important than ever.
yeah.
Services, like whatever you can do that's unique to you that you can sell to your audience is going to be great.
Yeah, I think
You
that's
know?
really good advice. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And kind of what would you say some of the barriers are now to entry? Obviously, people can make their own music and they can produce stuff in their rooms, but how could someone kind of, define making it, but want to be a successful artist and obviously get out there and build a strong audience? What kind of tips and hints would you give them, and what barriers do you see?
Yeah, I see. Oh, barriers. Yeah. So
So
there,
many.
there's definitely a lot of barriers. I think it's really tough now to cut through the noise, like no pun intended. There's just so much else that is taking up people's attention that, you're not just competing with other musicians and other artists. Like you're competing for people's attention with TikTok creators and
Mm.
streamers and other content creators and all these forms of content. Like there's so much that people can do on their phone right now that you really have to figure out a way to get people's attention. Whether
Yeah.
it seems like nowadays it's like the visual content is super important, and creating strong branding and visual branding in order to grasp people's attention. But you know there's other ways to do it as well.
And the attention span's got a lot shorter than it used to be as well, hasn't it? So it's very short form content as well now.
Yeah, it's all about short form now. So again, like when I started doing music work, it was all about like, let's spend, whatever budget we had on a music video,
Mhm.
or a live video, or something that was, you know, really high quality and really well produced. Versus now, it's almost like the opposite. It's like the quick, 30 video that you make, holding up your phone in your bedroom could be just as impactful as the, $20,000 budget music video that you try to make.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I really agree with you on that, Randy. Thank you. I was also going to say to you, like, how important is identity these days in being an artist? Because I think a lot of the ones that do actually stand out have a kind of unique identity or something different about them.
Yeah, I think that's super important, right? So, um, being first off, you don't want to be fake, right? So it's like the
Authenticity.
authenticity is so important these days, and
Yeah.
being true to who you are and who you're representing, because that's the thing is, listeners, they're not just listeners anymore, they're supporters, right? So
Part
they
of your
want to
identity.
believe, yeah, they want to believe in the thing that they're listening to, and they want to understand who you are as an artist and what you represent and what you stand for.
Yeah.
It's not enough these days to just make music. Now you also need to have a voice,
Yes, totally agree with you. And also, when would an artist need a lawyer? Because I think, I would always recommend for artists to get a lawyer before a manager, possibly, because you
Yeah.
obviously need that advice and that, someone that's got your back and they've got industry contacts, like you said. Would you advise an artist to get a lawyer or to start looking for one?
Honestly, as early as you possibly can, you
Okay.
know. But more specifically, once you start really collaborating with other people and other entities, that's when you need a lawyer. So whether that's, you know, you're working with a producer for the first time, or you're working with another artist that's doing a verse on your track, or, if you're approached by a management company or an agency or a record label, especially, that's when you need a lawyer. Is once you start working with other people and
Yeah.
you're moving outside of just being a bedroom artist and doing things on your own, you need agreements between you and everybody else that you're collaborating with and working with.
And that costs quite a bit of money as well. And for artists that don't make much money, how could you advise them to even find a lawyer when they're sometimes on a short budget or they don't have much?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a struggle. But I mean, some lawyers are more affordable than you would realize. Like I definitely, I have rates that are specific for independent artists, and
Awesome. Oh,
you,
brilliant.
yeah, so I can't charge the same, if you're on a major label and you're in that major label system and there's a big advance coming your way and all this stuff, I can't charge what I would charge them
Yes. Yeah.
to an independent artist that's on a DIY budget,
I love
so
that. So you're very
um
accessible.
I try to be. I
Yeah.
try to be, because I really believe that every artist should have quality representation. And that's kind of why I started my law firm is, when I was in my capacity as an A&R, I
Yeah.
saw how few artists were um, how few artists were actually represented by a lawyer and actually
Exactly.
getting the advice that they needed. So I thought, I call myself the music lawyer to the indie stars, right? So I wanted to be that person who could help, you know, the smaller independent artists
Yeah.
still get the quality representation that I think they deserve, you
Awesome.
know.
That's really, really good, actually. And would you recommend having lawyers in different territories, or do you just have one main lawyer that deals with it all? Because laws are different in different territories as well, right?
It is, it is. So yeah, I would definitely recommend having an attorney um in different territories depending on where you're working, but typically you're going to want to find, at least initially, your attorney is going to be in the territory that you're based out of,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah,
But if you're an artist in the UK or the EU and you're doing deals with an American record label or, somebody in another country,
yeah,
then we get into international laws and there's a whole lot of, you know,
exactly. Yeah. So I do a lot of
complexity there. Yeah.
yeah, because I kind of I'm in the music business itself, but I've used the music business to build up my kind of following and fans and a fan base, and then I'm also going to be bringing out music later on this year as well. So for me, it's been a great point actually where I've kind of started something and pivoted to do something else. But it's really interesting to hear that you say about that because I think when you're dealing with different currencies and different laws and different
Hmm.
countries even. I think sometimes that can be a bit confusing, and knowing that you've got someone in that territory that can deal with those certain things because they are different. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it is, and it's different. A lot of countries have like reciprocity in their um, copyright and trademarking laws.
Yeah,
But when you get into specific things where you start talking about tax implications in different countries, or
easier than
financial implications, it could be very very complex and nuanced depending on where exactly the contract is drafted.
right.
You know,
Okay. And obviously getting
yeah.
into the lawyer part of it as well, going back to that as well for yourself personally. How did you find that? And did you find it was a lot of money that you had to invest in yourself to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, law school is definitely not cheap. So
Yeah.
there is that, and the time that it took, and then also, I think things might have been different had I gone straight into practicing law after law
Okay.
school. But I
Definitely.
did have to spend a decade or so like really learning the industry. But I think that's what sets me apart now and kind of gives me an advantage is
Yeah.
I'm not just looking at it from a lawyer's perspective. Like I've been in the trenches. I've seen,
So,
artist development. I've seen A&R. I've seen management. I've
yeah.
been, I've worn a lot of hats.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
So
that's the kind of person you really want, actually, is someone that can understand the business, not just from a lawyer
right,
point of view, but from a management point of view, from an artist point of view as well. So that's really beneficial.
yeah,
Um,
because the black letter law, right, is
yeah,
is honestly not that complicated when it comes to music. Like you're dealing with the same kind of agreements all the time.
Right.
But it's the it's all the stuff in between, right? It's the strategy, it's the connections, it's the,
The
you know,
syndicates, the little thing,
yes,
the numbers,
exactly.
right, and rights, because that's super important as well, is retaining rights. Because what a lot of people don't realize is those rights are kind of your pension fund. That's your
Yeah.
future. So how
Yeah.
do you advise artists on rights? And especially from going maybe from an indie into a major label, what would you advise them to do with that, with those rights?
Yeah, I would say, even more important why you need a lawyer, because you want to protect,
Yes.
whatever rights you have. And if you are giving up rights, so it used to be, this is, 20, 30 years ago in the music industry, typically most deals were um, perpetual, so you would basically give up your rights forever.
A
And
time.
those,
Oh, forever.
those would, and those would never come back to you. They would
Right.
just belong to the label or the entity that purchased them, right? But now what we're seeing a lot more of is licensing deals. So you're not assigning your copyright, you're licensing your rights. So, a label, and it might be a long time, like they might have them for 30 years,
Yeah.
but at some point it's going to come back to you. And
Right.
that's super important to get, that's what's called a reversion. So it's super important to get those reversions in paper and in your contract so that you're not giving everything away.
Yes.
And if you are giving everything away, you better be compensated accordingly, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, a lot of people don't realize that when you sign a label agreement, that's a loan, and they've got
yes.
to keep that money back. What would you advise someone to do? Get a smaller advance, and then obviously pay that back, and that gives you more benefits for the next kind of negotiation. Or would you say to them, get a bigger advance and then just hope for the best, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work? What kind of advice?
Yeah, it's certainly it depends. It depends on the situation.
Okay.
But I would say in most cases, you want a reasonable advance. So I mean, you don't want to. It's always nice when people dangle a big, large sum of money in front of you, but again, yeah, you want to be realistic about what is my catalog earning, what do I expect to earn in the near future, and how soon can I repay this money? Because what typically happens is if you don't repay the money, they own your rights until you do. You
Okay.
know, that's
Yeah.
kind of the collateral that is used in these agreements, right? So what could have been a 10-year deal or a 12-year deal could turn into a 25 or a 30-year deal because you haven't recouped, you know.
See.
And the music industry is so fickle that sometimes, after 10 years your music unfortunately could be completely irrelevant
Oh,
and
sure.
not earning any money anymore, so those advances could be held over you for a long, long time,
So if you
you
don't pay
know.
that money back, they'll still hold that debt over you, basically, even if you've not sold the records.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
You don't want to
and
get
then and then you either need to, if you have a buyout clause, you either need to buy out your contract, which
right.
means you have to use your own money,
Wow.
or they're, like I said, they're just going to hold that contract over you until you do recoup.
So that's why I've seen some certain artists, especially female rappers, that some of them have actually just gone bankrupt. And then it's like, what's happened to them? They've just filed for
Yeah,
bankruptcy. Is that why?
yeah, that's exactly why.
Right.
You
Okay.
know,
That's really, really interesting. Really interesting.
yeah.
So you learned something
So
new today.
yeah, yeah, and I could talk about advances all day, but
Yeah.
you definitely need to be careful too that you're, when you get that money, you're not just spending it on, jewelry and
Yeah.
cars and
Yeah.
stuff. Like
Okay. You've got to.
you need to figure out, yeah, how you're going to allocate those funds in order to earn even more money in the future for you, as well as holding back some of that money for things like taxes and,
So it's like a
fees to
saving account,
management and
really, that
stuff.
you kind of invest back into yourself to help you grow and to make the next project.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where you need to look at when you're trying to figure out how much money you're going to take.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does make sense to take a larger advance if you have a plan for it,
Yeah.
you know. But it's about being very strategic and intentional about
I'm very
what
strict.
money you
You've
take.
got to be these days, especially in the music industry as well, because like you said, it's not a bad industry to be in, but there's a lot of people that will take advantage of you if you don't know
Oh,
what to
for
do,
sure.
and it's
Yeah,
happened to me many a times. So sometimes you have to learn the hard way, and sometimes you have to learn those lessons in order for them not to happen again. Luckily, they haven't done
absolutely.
anything bad or anything like that, but just small little things that sometimes you learn as you go along. which is really, really important.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Andy, if you could,
that's why it's important to have good, I'm sorry.
no, that's
Oh,
all
I
right.
was just gonna say that's why it's important to have a strong advocate as well, somebody that's been through this and
Yeah.
seen the potential pitfalls and the potential mistakes that can be made to help you avoid those.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And obviously, for the listeners, that there might be some listeners out there that want to get into entertainment law. They are looking to
Mm.
get into this industry and they want to do what you do. What advice could you share with them, and what would be the best ways forward?
Yeah, I would definitely say learn as much as you can, from books like the Passman book, all you need to know about the music business, or Ari Herstand is another,
Yeah.
artist manager that has a great, I think it's something about the new music business. I I can't remember the exact title, but read these resources that are out there, learn the ins and outs of the business, and it might take you a while to actually become a lawyer because you need to go to school and you need to do all that stuff. But if you can get, internships or entry level positions doing other things in the industry, I think that's super valuable for
Yeah.
trying to do, what I do now
Get,
is
get that
it's
real lived experience.
exactly. And learn the nuances of different parts of the business. Like learn about publishing, learn about distribution,
Super
learn
important.
about management, learn all these things, work, like I said, work for a variety of companies if you can and get that experience, and
Yeah.
try to be as well rounded as you possibly
Yeah.
can.
Understand how the industry operates. I say this to everybody. It's super important, even for artists, for everyone in the music industry. You need to know who those main players are and how the business operates. I think that's all
Absolutely.
success for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your thoughts and feelings on equality, diversity, inclusion, especially for lawyers and especially in the States? Are you seeing diverse people being represented? And are you seeing more lawyers that are from diverse backgrounds too?
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I don't want to get into the current administration in the
Like,
US and
don't go there. Feel
the
free to.
potential, I don't know where it's going to go in the future, but at
Right.
least, up until this point, I've definitely seen a lot of companies push for more diversity and inclusion in the industry.
Yeah.
And there's some great organizations that are, doing, like Symphonic Distribution. My former employer does like a women in music initiative where they,
Oh, amazing
um,
from them.
yeah, where they kind of highlight, different women in the industry and partner them up with, you know, up and coming, women in the industry as well. But
Yeah.
outside of just that, I mean, um, there's definitely, more of a push for, diversity in these fields and in the legal industry, for a long time. Again, I don't know how things are going to change now, but
Yeah.
a lot of the schools even were pushing for, more inclusive classes and
Brilliant.
having,
That's good.
people from a variety of backgrounds,
Yeah. Yeah.
um like I'm Cuban American, so
So I love
my
Cuba.
family,
Very nice.
yeah, yeah. So my family was originally from Cuba, and so when I was in law school, I had the opportunity to clerk for a judge who was actually the first Cuban American judge
Oh,
in
wow.
U.S. history.
Well done.
And I got that opportunity because of my background, and
Yeah.
I that was the kind of situation where normally I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity, but it opened, doors for me because they were looking to increase the diversity of um, their clerkships, if you will,
Yeah.
you know. And I think initiatives like that are super important to, you know, not only for the judge to give back to his community, but also just like I said, to help open doors for people that wouldn't normally have those doors open.
Yeah, I love to hear that. That's a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that too. This has been
Yeah.
super inspiring and empowering, actually. Thank you so much, Randy. I was just going to say to you as well, like, what's the climate like over there in the music industry in the US right now? What's going on? Is it all good? Tell us more.
Good question. Yeah, it's I mean the big thing right now, I think this is happening globally, but it's definitely happening in the US is um the effects of like artificial intelligence and
Yes.
AI on
Yeah.
music. So um the the federal courts just had a ruling on copyright
Yeah.
in the
Really cool.
US.
We're trying to do that.
Yeah, and they basically ruled that in order for a work to receive copyright protection, it needs to have human authorship, right? So
Yeah.
it can't just be an AI creation. And then they also ruled that simply prompting the AI is not enough of human intervention
Okay.
to qualify for copyright. So that's a big thing, you know.
Okay.
But now the question is going to be, what does qualify for
Yeah,
human
it's a
input?
great
You know,
audience,
where's
especially.
the line?
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially when it's creators' music that's being taken to train AI, which is what I don't agree with, and then them copying that kind of music and making something similar.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be the real question is, you know, right now copyright deals with origin. So where did this idea originate? And with AI, it's so hard to pinpoint exactly where the idea originated that, you know, I know there's going to be a lot more litigation, there's going to be lawsuits, there's going to be more, you know, court rulings and a lot of precedents set over the next 5, 10, however many years about AI and its use in music. I think we're just at the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to
See, I think
that
for me,
discussion.
I do agree with AI in certain areas. For example, like helping me write a report or helping me write an email or responding to an email or something. I will use AI
Yeah.
to kind of advance some of the work that I've already done or to enhance it. But I don't agree with it completely making stuff because it can't. It kind of doesn't have the emotion or the lived experience that music provides, does it? It doesn't have that connection.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, you know, even as the AI models get quote unquote better, like
Yeah.
I think there's still a disconnect between what's created by a person, what's created by the
Yes.
computer, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I really agree with you. And have you ever suffered from discrimination in the music industry as being someone from multiracial background?
Yeah, I think a lot of people at times will assume that I'm heavily involved like in Latin music just because of my last name or, you know,
Yeah,
because I'm from Florida. There's a big Latin
yeah,
music population in like Miami, for example.
yeah,
But I definitely do work in Latin music. I'm not saying I don't, but it's just one part of, you know, many different areas of music that I love and appreciate and work in. And, you know, just because my last name is Ojeda, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know,
yeah. I'm mixed
yeah,
as well. Like my mum's African American English, my dad's Spanish and English, but everyone always assumes I'm kind of South American for some reason. I don't know why.
yeah. It's
Making
the
it,
last name. That's what gets us, you
and they
know.
live down in Vero Beach, so yeah, it's in your kind of vicinity, shall we say? And there's
Yeah.
some stuff going on in Miami. What's your thoughts on New York and what they do? Because I know New York's a big super powerhouse. You've got Miami, you've got a few areas like Philly, Los Angeles. Which ones would you say are the good ones in?
Yeah. You know, I would actually argue that now I think one of the benefits of the way the industry is laid out and the way the internet and everything works is that, you know, you don't have to be in one of those powerhouse cities
Okay,
to really make it in the industry. You
yeah,
know, like I'm from Tampa, Florida, which is a pretty small market compared to New York or LA.
yeah,
I go to New York and LA often, you know, to meet and connect with people, but I don't feel like I have to be there to make it.
right.
Whereas,
That's
you know,
brilliant.
10, 15, 20 years ago, that was kind of a requirement, you know, to make it in the US at least, you know. But in terms of answering your question, like New York is always fun. You know, there's a lot going on. There's a big variety of music there.
Yeah,
Everything from, you know, rock and pop and your sort of typical genres to, you know, like there's a lot of jazz and blues and even classical music in
very
New
big
York.
part of music,
Um,
creativity down there.
it is.
So,
It is. It's such a melting pot, you know. Um, and then LA is really still where like the industry is, you know. That's where a lot of the managers and lawyers and
yeah,
people in the biz
players,
are still in
yeah,
LA,
big players, yeah.
you know. But like I said, I think that's changing now and, you know, with being able to communicate with somebody from across the pond on Zoom, you know, it's like
I do it
there's
all.
so many other ways to connect with people.
Yes, and build meaningful relationships. I think that's also really, really important in this industry is to keep in touch and build meaningful
Absolutely.
relationships. Sure.
Absolutely.
So, do you want to share any major wins or successes with us before you go? Oh, you're frozen there. Hopefully it'll come back on. I'll just sit and be patient. It should come back on. Oh, we've lost Larry. Oh, you're back. Are you back? Yeah, hopefully he'll be back. Sorry, everyone. We just had a little technical problem, but Randy will be back in a minute. Hey, sorry, we lost you there. Sorry.
I think I'm back. Are
Yeah,
you
you're
still
back.
there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's breaking up a little bit. I'm
Sorry, I
sorry.
think it might be the signal. No, it's absolutely fine. Any major wins or successes you want to share with us before you go?
Yeah. Well, there unfortunately there's some wins that I can't share just because of
Fair
for
enough.
legal, you know.
Scott. Oh, we're having some technical difficulties, but please bear with us. Randy's over in the other side of, in America, so sometimes the signal does cut in and out. So please do bear with me. Just give it another minute or so, and I'm sure he'll be back. No, we'll wait another 30 seconds, and hopefully Randy will come back online. I'll be patient. This hasn't happened before, so please do bear with us, listeners. And I do apologize for any inconvenience. Hey, you're back. Thanks, everyone. Just bear with us while Randy's just sorting himself out. Oh, well, I might have to leave it if we can't get Randy back on. But it's been absolutely awesome. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I will be leaving Randy's details in the link and description below. And thank you all for tuning in. And I do apologize. Hopefully, we'll get Randy back on the line. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Are we back?
Yes, you're back. Yay. Sorry.
It's funny we were talking about how easy it is to connect with people and
This
then we
happened
get
well. I did explain to the listeners that you are over in the States, so please bear with it. We're just having some technical issues, but thank you for coming back.
yeah. Yes.
So major wins and successes. Not any big ones. If you're not allowed to share them, that's fine. But is there any small ones you would like to share with us?
Well, actually, what I was going to say is a big win um, in general for my area has been there's an artist by the name of Dochi
Oh,
who's
yes.
from
My
uh,
favorite.
yeah who's yeah she's from Tampa, Florida,
Awesome.
and yeah, and she actually was a she won the Grammy, obviously this year, and
It's
it
lovely.
really put a spotlight on this area in Tampa, Florida, in particular, because of that's where she's from. And since then, there's been a lot of interest from major labels and entities that normally wouldn't look at this area, but now they are, and that's led to this year alone we've signed a multitude of major label deals, management deals,
Well,
publishing deals for a lot of these artists, and
yes.
I'm not saying it's just because of Dochi. Like I think this has been
Remember
brewing for a long time.
Trina? I can remember quite a few female rappers from down in Florida. So I'm a
Yeah.
female rapper fan actually.
Cool, cool. Yeah. Well, Dochi definitely put a spotlight on what we're doing here. So, love her. And I think that's been a big win for
Brilliant.
Tampa
It does.
and for what I do.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, definitely. And how would people connect with you, Randy, if they want to find out more, they want to connect with you, or even maybe get some services from you? How could they do that?
Yeah, so I mean, you can always go to my website, randyohedalaw.com. You can email me, randy@randyohedalaw.com. You can
Yeah,
follow me on all the social networks. I'm at real Randy Ojeda. Don't follow the fake Randy Ojeda. Follow the real Randy Ojeda.
yeah,
That's me.
sure.
And really, I just launched a Discord community.
Yeah,
So it's a Discord server. we're at about 200 members right now, but it's filled with songwriters and producers, industry people, a whole wide variety of awesome and amazing people that are contributing to this community that we're building. So if you're into Discord, if you want to, chat with us and ask questions, feel free to join. But yeah, just look for me online. I try to respond to all my DMs and all my messages, and
Thank you. You've been so kind with me.
I'm way more accessible than you'd think.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience and your time with my rearranging today. It was a bit messy, but we got there in the end. And
No, you're totally fine.
thank you so much. And if you could send me the link, I will share that in the description along with everything else. So thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of the night.
You too.